Hey everybody, I've got my bowl and today we're headed out to pick our elderberries so that we can make some elderberry juice, some elderberry syrup, and talk about making elderberry tinctures. Now we have our elderberries in the house. We pick them from the bushes out in our yard so we know that they are free and clear of any kind of sprays or poisons. And this is what's left in the first bowl. I forgot to start videoing before we got going. And you can see in this bowl that there's still a lot of green berries. And we're going to be pulling all those off, taking those out. Like you can see here, I've got the green berries, some stems, some leaves, sticks, that kind of stuff that was in the bush. And then I put them into another bowl, still on their original stems, and Steve's going through, making sure I didn't miss any of the green ones, taking the berries off the stems so that we can move on to the next step. We were able to get all the berries off the stems, so we'll be able to get rid of the stems, and ended up with just over 8 cups of the elderberries. So our next step is going to be to get these into our steam juicer to collect the juice. Well, got the elderberries all set. As you can see, I've got a lot going on here today. I'm in the middle of making pizza sauce as well as getting these elderberries done. So I ended up, after getting all the green ones, the stems, and the leaves out, with 8 cups of nice ripe elderberries. So the next step is going to be to get these into our steam juicer. I have the bottom portion of my steam juicer filled with water. I've got a marble in there. If you want to know why I use a marble, if you haven't seen it in my previous steam juicing videos, leave a comment and I can explain that for you. The next step is to get the top portion on and then get the elderberries into the steam juicer as well. So I'm just going to pour the elderberries in the top of the juicer. Make sure we get all of them in there. We don't want to miss out on any of that goodness. And I'm going to put the cover on it. We're going to turn this on and we're going to let it steam. Now, as these steam, the juice is going to come out this hose. Right now I have it clamped off until we can build up some steam and some juice. And then it's going to drain into this jar. Now, this is something I always make sure I tell everybody. If you have kids or pets that could disturb this, maybe find another way to do it. For us, we don't have to worry about that, so this works out really well for us. And if need be, once I open this up, if I end up with more than this jar can hold, I can clamp this back off, put another jar in, and go from there. So let me get the heat going on this, and I'll come back when we've got some juice. You can see we're starting to get elderberry juice in this straw, in the hose here. So you have to remember this is going to be very, very hot. So I've got to be real careful. So I made sure that the hose is in the top of the jar. I'm just going to squeeze this so that that can come out. And I'm going to put the little plug Steve made for me in here to keep that open. And now the juice is going to strain down into the jar. The important thing at this point is to keep an eye on the jar to make sure the jar isn't going to overflow. When it starts to get full, swap it out for another clean, sterilized jar. And I'll be back when we've got all the juice steamed out and we'll see how much we end up with. Well, we ended up with 2 quarts of juice from our steamed elderberries. So we started with 8 cups of elderberries and we ended up with 8 cups of juice, which I think is a pretty good result. So as usual, life got in the way. We ended up having to freeze the juice. I took the juice back out, thawed it, and now I've got it back in my jars to move forward. So if anything happens and life gets in the way with you, like it often does with us, this is something you can put in the freezer and get back to, and it isn't going to hurt it at all. Now I'm at the point where I'm going to pour this into a pot. I'm going to get it on the stove and bring it back up to a simmer so that we can move forward from there. So while our elderberry juice is warming back up on the stove, I wanted to go over a few things about elderberry in general. Now, elderberry has a very rich history in use medicinally. So the history of elderberry, the European variety especially, which is linked to healing properties, goes back to 400 BC. And the European version name, I believe, is pronounced Sambucus nigra. So there are 30 or more different types of elderberry plants and trees around the world. So depending what you have in your area, make sure you do your own research. But its medicinal link is that elderberry is an antioxidant and it's very high in vitamin C, which is why you see that touted a lot for helping boost your immune system, helping you get through colds and flus. People use it in teas. They use the berries and the flowers. Now, the stems, the leaves, and the branches are toxic, so you don't use those. I'll talk a little bit more about the berries themselves. I think I may have mentioned it earlier that the berries uncooked, you want to cook them. The green berries are toxic, uncooked especially, but the green berries, that's why I took those out when I sorted mine. And there's a lot of different ways you can use elderberry. We'll go over how to make, like I said, how to make a tincture. We'll go over how to make a syrup. But let me go check that on the stove and see how it's warming up. While we're waiting, I also wanted to answer a question that comes in a lot about what if you don't have an official fancy canner and you want to be able to can your items. So today I'm using my grandmother's old stock pot. It's a white enamel stock pot. It's about 12 inches across, about 8 inches high, and it's great for me to use for my quarter pint, half pint, and pint size jars. It's not quite tall enough for me to use for quarts, but it works great for the other ones. Now, if you have your official, say, graniteware canner, which I do have 2 of, I have a large one, and then I have a medium-sized one along with all my pressure canners. And if you don't happen to have one of those, or don't have the funds to go purchase one, you can use a regular stock pot that you have in your kitchen with a few little additions. Now, this is for water bath canning only, not for pressure canning. But what you can do is you can use your stock pot like I'm using mine, and you can put something in the bottom that's going to keep the jars up off the bottom of the pot, because you don't want to just put the jars in right on the bottom of the pot, likely to break. So you can pick up something like this. It's basically an in-pot trivet for your jars. It replaces the normal tray that comes in that you lift out. When you put in your jars, you can lift it up, prop it on the side of your canner. These can replace that. Now, this one, I believe, is about 10 inches across. I'll make sure that I leave a link to this in the description. Normally, I believe they come in a 2-pack as well, which can come in handy if you're canning quarter pint jars, especially, because you can put one of these on the bottom, put your row of quarter pint jars, put another one of these on top of those jars and do another row of quarter pint jars. Now, the big thing to remember if you're using a stock pot is that you have to make sure when your jars are in there, whatever size you're using, that you have at least an inch of water above the top of your jars. That's why the pot I'm using today wouldn't work well for quarts, because I'd really be pushing it to get enough water in to keep my 1 inch above my jars. Now, another option are these rubber trivet pieces. Now, again, these usually come in a 2-pack. It kind of stretches. It also has a little attachment on it that allows you to take it apart. It's this little silver piece, and you can take it apart. You can put 2, there goes my little clip. You can put 2 or more of these together in the bottom of a pot to make them stretch out and fit under your jars. So these work out really well. I've also used these in the bottom of smaller pots if I have something that's in glass that I want to set in the pot to warm, but I don't want it in the bottom of the pot. So these come in really handy as well. I'll make sure I put a link to these in the description as well. But I just wanted you to know, you don't have to have an official, expensive canner for water bath canning. There are other options out there for you. So, you know, feel free to check these out and see if it's something that would work better for you. So it may be overkill, but anytime I do any type of water bath canning, I always take my jars, I put them in hot boiling water for 5 minutes before I put anything into them. This way I know not only are they hot jars, but they're also sterile jars ready for me to use. So I just took these out of the hot water. Now I'm going to prep them for my elderberry juice. I'm using real lemon, and I'm going to put in a teaspoon of lemon juice into the bottom of each of these jars, and then we will get the elderberry juice in. So because this jar is going to be super hot, I'm using my heat resistant gloves. I have my funnel, and I'm going to put my elderberry juice into the jar with the lemon juice. I'm going to fill it and leave a 1/2 inch head space. Now, if I was doing this with berries in it, I would need to debubble the jars, but since I'm doing just juice, I don't have to do that. So I'm gonna get these all filled, and as soon as they're filled, I'll be right back. So now that I have my jars filled, I'm just wiping the top of the jar before I put the lid on to make sure that it comes out clean, that there's nothing on there that's gonna cause a problem with the seal. I'm going to just pick up a lid, get one here, put that on top, and then I'm just going to hand tighten my rings. I'm going to do that for all my jars and get them in the canner. So I'm putting my last jar in. Now I'm going to cover this pot. I'm going to bring it back to a boil, and once it comes to a boil, I'm going to set my timer for 15 minutes, which is the time that these need to process. I'll be back with you when they're done. Now that my elderberry juice is canned and it's cooling behind me over next to the wood cook stove, I'm going to show you how I make our elderberry syrup. Now, I usually only make elderberry syrup as we need it. I don't make it and store it. So this is one that I'm going to make, and then it's going to be stored in the refrigerator. So it has only a few ingredients. I've got my elderberry juice, some honey, some ground cloves, and some ground ginger. So I have put 1 cup of my elderberry syrup into this pint jar, and I'm going to add 1/2 cup of honey. Now I'm using a local honey, and it's always best to use local honey if you can, because it's made from the things in your area. So it's going to be more beneficial to you specifically. If you can't get local honey, I mean, of course, always use what you can get. That's what's most important. And then I'm just going to use 1/4 of a teaspoon, barely 1/4 of a teaspoon. I'm using a 1/2 teaspoon, so I'm going to fill it half full of ground cloves. And I'm going to use a 1/4 teaspoon of ginger. Now the cloves and ginger both have medicinal purposes as well to help fight a cold. And the honey, of course, has its medicinal purposes and makes it taste a lot better. So very simply, we're just going to mix these together. And some people add cinnamon because they like the flavor of the cinnamon. And this is going to make just a nice syrup that I can put in the fridge. Cover this, I'm going to put it in the fridge, and it can stay in there for 2 to 4 weeks. And then let's move on to what else we can do with our elderberries. To make a tincture with your elderberries, you're going to take a jar, you're going to fill it with your elderberries, you're going to top that jar off and fill it with vodka, and then you are going to use something to debubble. Make sure you've got all the bubbles out in between your berries, and make sure that the vodka is still to the top, covering your berries. You're going to cover it, and you're going to let it sit 3 to 4 weeks. And then it'll be ready for use. And that should have a shelf life of up to 5 years if stored correctly. Now, for syrups, for tinctures, you can use dried berries as well as fresh berries, depending on what you have available to you. An important piece I didn't want to forget was dosage. Now, for a syrup, if you're using it as a preventative, you're going to do about a tablespoon a day. If you start to get symptoms of a cold, you can do 2 tablespoons or up to 4 tablespoons a day. Now, if you're using a tincture for the same thing, you're going to do a teaspoon a day as a preventative, and then up to 3 to 4 teaspoons if you've already got the symptoms of your cold in place. If you have any questions on how any of that works, feel free to make sure you leave it in the comments. This has been a fun video for us to make. It gives us something else medicinal in our pantry, especially with cold and flu season coming on. Now, if there's anything else you'd like to see us make in this kind of a video, please make sure you comment and let us know. Give us a thumbs up to like our video, share it with anybody who you think might enjoy it. And until next time, everybody, take care.